Mayday, mayday, mayday.
We're talking to people who have had emergencies today in the hangar.
I used to be a well-respected member of the aviation community, and then I started flying a Cirrus, and that changed.
Oh, that was great until the engine quit.
And all of a sudden I see these explosions and these trees exploding.
I'm walking away a better pilot because of this discussion. Welcome to In the Hangar. I'm Christy Wong.
And I'm Dan Millican. Today we're talking emergencies, and we have some people who have had real emergencies. On my right, Travis. Travis, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
My name is Travis J. I work for a Part 142 training provider and a business jet manufacturer. I own a small company that restores light aircraft, particularly vintage Beech Twins, and I'm currently working on an STC for a cabin lighting system, so a little bit of everything mixed up into a bunch of nothing. Married a pilot. My wife is a member of the FAST team, which is how I met Tamara and Christy and got here today, I suppose.
All right, so Mark, tell us about yourself.
I was retired from FedEx last year by age. I retired out of the Navy, and I flew fighters in both the Air Force and the Navy.
Oh, wow.
And flown general aviation since 1965.
Wow.
So I've been around for a few years.
All right, Tamara?
My name's Tamara Griffith, and I have been in aviation since I was born. Didn't know there was any other life. Grew up with it with both my parents as pilots and mechanics in air traffic control. I am an aircraft mechanic also. And right now, currently a career flight instructor. I've done a lot of other areas of aviation, but this is what I am. A little of nothing.
A whole bunch of wing nuts.
That was my first thing I took apart.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. I mean, really, as a lower time pilot, I've not yet experienced major emergencies in flight. I had a flat nose wheel on landing once, and that's about the extent of my adrenaline rush while flying. So I appreciate you guys sharing your wisdom today. What constitutes an emergency for you guys?
Wow. Well, an emergency is any time that you need priority over anything else. So is the engine not working? Is the landing gear not working? Are we having a problem where we have potential for catastrophe on top of everything else? Do I have sick passengers? Do I have some kind of fuel critical status? Those are kind of the general big things that we talk about, I think, in emergencies.
Yeah.
I would say the same thing. Sometimes I even, declaring an emergency even when we think there's a potential for something that's seriously wrong. If you had known that my tire didn't feel right when I landed, declaring that emergency. I've done it several times,
Well, I think the fear for me as also a low time pilot is that, when do you declare emergency? And, am I going to declare emergency too soon and FAA pointing fingers at me and mounds of paperwork versus declaring emergency too late and I'm dead. So there's a balance, and as a new pilot, I don't know where to reach that balance.
Can we just dispel a rumor just to start with?
Yes, please.
In this country, there's no paperwork for an emergency.
Okay, good.
At other countries, yeah, like in the Bahamas, you have to fill out a bicycle, car, boat, airplane accident report form. It's like half a page.
And to
Here,
I'm glad you said that because yours was a low front tire. For me, I had a low voltage while in IFR at night heading towards New York City.
that's a good one.
So I did not.
New York. Yeah.
Well, I wasn't in the New York airspace yet, but I was talking to, I was with their center, and I went ahead and immediately diverted to the nearest. There was a Class C that I was 10 miles from, and low voltage. I'd actually had it before, so it didn't scare me. And that's just, I got plenty of battery to last 30 minutes and I'm 5 minutes from an airport. So no big deal. So I just let them know that. And I told them it's not an emergency because my flight instructor during instrument when we had a low voltage had said, make sure you tell them it's not an emergency or you'll have paperwork, or whatever. Paperwork. And so I landed and they rolled trucks anyway. They declared emergency and I didn't know that they could do that.
They sure can. The taxi of shame when the fire department follows you to the ramp.
Well, I got pictures. And we'll put that up right now. But so I got there, and then I had to fill out. Now the fire chief he asked me some questions and filled some stuff out. Sure. I didn't fill it out, and then that was it until 2 weeks later. I get a call from the FSDO for that area, and he asked me a question. So what was the result? And I go into this long spiel about it was the generator bell. So plane's back in service. Yep. Okay, that's all I wanted.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think the biggest thing is to not worry about the consequences. What matters is getting the airplane on the ground safely
Okay.
and alerting somebody that you may have a situation like what you're talking about. You don't have to declare an emergency, but you can certainly let a controller know, we have a problem and I need some time to sort it out, call me back, whatever, but don't let them fly your airplane for you.
Absolutely.
You know? And the situation depends upon what kind of airplane you're flying. If you're in a heavy airplane with a crew and the airplane's on autopilot, you have plenty of time to grab a cup of coffee and go through the checklist. If you're in a single engine airplane, that's a whole different situation. If you have a fire, you have smoke in the cockpit, that determines
that's pretty
your
clear.
action on what you can do. But even in those situations, you can squawk 7700 immediately, and that's going to draw some attention to the people. And they're going to get somebody that's going to follow you, so you can go on from there.
Well, if I'm on flight following, if I'm on IFR and I'm talking to center anyway, do I really need to take the time to squawk 77? I mean, because I'm going to tell them right off the bat.
If you've told them, then you've already addressed the problem.
Okay.
How does one train for an emergency, really? Like, I mean, during private pilot training, of course, it's, oh, you lost an engine, what do you do? Find a field and land. But obviously, as you grow up in the pilot career, there are a lot more things that can go wrong. How do you train for that?
I think Travis hit it on the nose. You know, you train in the simulator with as many emergencies as you possibly can. I did plenty of hours as a sim instructor myself.
We can make you sweat. Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, if you're going to make
Really?
a mistake, let's
Oh,
do it
yes.
in the simulator, and that's where you get your real
So
practice.
really,
Best
like
way to
you're-
learn is by mistake.
You're
That's-
putting
yeah.
somebody in the simulator and, oh, no, you lost a wing, go. Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, there's not a lot of work in losing
Yeah.
a wing. You just kind of sit back and watch
That's
the
just
ride.
learning your
yeah.
spiel, what you're going to
Enjoy
say,
the
your last
last-
words.
No, but you deal with it and you learn, and we always have the ability to critique and anything we do. If we have an actual emergency, we can go back and say, hey, how did that go, and what did I do right, and what didn't I do right? And it can happen internally, or it can happen with other people, and it just depends. In a simulator environment, then yeah, there's eyes watching you all over the place, and everything you do is critiqued, and sometimes harshly and sometimes not harshly enough. But the professionals get a lot more training on that front than the average GA pilot does. And that's something that really is kind of more of a problem, I think.
Yeah.
For the recreational pilot, we just don't back up that information very well.
So, I mean, obviously, you know, right now as a GA pilot, I practice go-arounds and practice engine outs and the power off 180s and things like that. But realistically, what can we do as GA pilots to prepare for an emergency or train or practice?
I teach my students, play the what-if game. While you're sitting there bored, whether it's in cruise, where would I put this plane down? Looking out at your various places, how much altitude do I have to lose? How much altitude do I not have to lose? You know, so how far?
What if that ox tank doesn't feed?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Play the little what-if games, and I will tell you through my few emergencies that I've had in my career, it was other people's stories. So hearing their stories, hearing their critiques, hearing these, you know, breakdowns affected my decision making down the road. And that's where, you know, those are your practice sessions.
All right, so stories. That's a good segue. Tell me, let's go by each one of you. Tell me your story about an emergency.
Probably the most severe one was when I was flying freight. I had an engine began to give me problems in flight about 5,000 feet. I was inbound to Austin Bergstrom at the time, and it in the clouds. And they called 00 about the same time my engine started coughing and sputtering, to the point it was time to shut it down.
Okay, so just for those who don't know, what's 00?
00 visibility is where basically it's all fog all the way to the ground. You can't see your hand in front of your face feeling. That's about the easiest way to put it. I was so intense that it was probably less than 00 in my mind. In this case, the engine, I had to shut it down, but where these airplanes, it was a twin engine aircraft, normally would maintain altitude and continue flying. This one refused. So we were slowly in a descent rate. Based on all the calculations we did as pilots, looking at my descent rate, already called my emergency. I'm aiming for the airport that has Austin Berkshire has the emergency facilities. I'm not going to make the airport in my glide and everything that I'm doing minimally to try to make this runway. I'm thinking I'm not going to make it that day. But amazingly, it decided at the last minute to give me a little bit.
What happened?
I don't know what happened to the engine. I never learned from maintenance.
But it kicked back on?
No, never quit. It just basically, it got low enough. I think I gained enough from the
Thrust.
other engine to finally just stop that descent rate and finish the approach. I should have landed in a parking lot.
Did you land in 0-0?
Yes, I never officially saw that runway. I felt it, but I did not see it.
Wow.
Now the fire department said they could see my wingtip lights when they went by. Honestly, I never saw anything, but part of that's that focus we get when we're in an emergency where you can't think beyond literally this little tunnel that what we're doing. And I was very focused on putting that thing on something. I didn't know what was below me, but we're going to find out the hard way. So it was the best landing of my life.
Yeah, yeah. Mark, how about you?
Well, we're talking about engine failures. I've had 8.
8?
And 2 were in single engine airplanes. And both of those were at 500 feet.
Whoa.
And you don't have a lot of time to think about it. You just fly the airplane and put it on the ground. I will say that out of all the engine failures, none of them were catastrophic engine failures. Most of them were fuel related in one way or another. And the first case was back in college. I was delivering airplanes, and you just, at the time, pull back, and if the houses get smaller, then you're flying. It didn't really matter as far as qualifications go. I was delivering airplanes, and I didn't know anything about that particular airplane. It was an air coupe. And I could see that it had a feeder tank and a cork and a wire, like on a J3 Cup.
Right.
And that's your good fuel gauge. And that's going down, but I got 2 full wing tanks that should be putting gas in there. And that's not happening. And I was following the road. My plan was, if the engine failed, to be landing on this particular road. And all that was great until the engine quit, and there was a little town right in front of me.
On the road.
And there was time to make a 90-degree turn and another 90-degree turn, and I was on the ground. Wow. And it turned out, I knew there was an airport over there somewhere. It turned out I was on final 100 yards short of the runway.
Wow.
Had I seen it, I might have tried to go for it, but it's a good thing I didn't, because I wouldn't have made it, and it was up on a plateau anyway. And the problem was there was a fuel valve behind the seat, inaccessible in flight, that was supposed to be safety wired on, and it wasn't. So if you're going to fly another airplane, know something about the fuel system. And the other situation was the Skybolt that I had built, and had a 300 horsepower engine, and took off at a very steep climb, which was the fortunate thing. Everything had been fine on the airplane for many flights, and in this particular case, at 500 feet, the engine just quit. Boom, it's gone. And I made an immediate turn, and there was a diagonal runway that I was able to land on the grass strip. And just as the prop was about to stop, it started again. And I said a few words to it, and we taxied back to the hangar, and I took the whole fuel system apart, and it was basically some air had gotten into the line enough to cavitate the whole system.
Wow.
So, you know, it goes back to what we were talking about, you know, where you're always looking for that place to land. Doesn't matter where you are, and you have to commit. And there isn't any time when you're flying and you have an emergency to be thinking about what may happen, because you've already thought about it 100 times. You're always thinking about, well, if that engine should cough, this is where I'm going to go. If it's flying in a congested area at night, for example, there's only 2 things that are going to be dark. One is water, and the other is going to be mountains. And I'd rather go into the water than I would in the mountains. So these are things, again, that you have to have already thought about ahead of time. But it's always been an interesting situation.
Wow.
I want to point out the body language. we're talking about emergencies, and we have a pair of very seasoned pilots in front of us, and the eyes are watering, the voices are wavering. This is always scary stuff. It doesn't matter if you're new to aviation or you've been around a million years, everybody is afraid of the next thing that's going to happen that's going to make them think, oh man, is this going to be the last thing I ever see, right? And it doesn't matter. I can see it in every veteran's tales, and I can see it in neophytes' tales as well. When you're new to it, it's just as scary as when it's your last day.
Yeah, they're talking and I'm like tensing up over here.
Yeah, no, my chair is creaking, I think, underneath me with these stories.
So, Travis, how about you?
Well, my last emergency, let's just go to that one. We bought a new airplane just recently, my wife and I, and it's a very old airplane. It was built in 1942, and it's been modified many times since it was built. It's an old radial engine Beech 18, officially a C-45. But we put it back into service. It had been sitting for about 5 years out of service. Before that, it was on program maintenance. It was doing Navy contract flying, and before that, it belonged to somebody else, and the government operated it incognito for quite a while, and before that it was in the Army. So it's a really unique airplane, and it has a great history, but it's been sitting out in the desert. Granted, some of it's indoors, some of it's outdoors, but a museum had a hold of it, and they were doing what they called the long annual program, which is about a 3-year long annual, which is not really enough to be considered program maintenance, in my opinion. I'm sure Tamara can vouch to that. So we did a lot of work, and we actually did an annual inspection on the airplane, and we got it up and running, and we flew it and ran it and flew it and ran it, and finally we brought it all the way from California back to Texas, where we are, where my company has its base. And we flew it around a little bit, and then we decided we're going to go to Oshkosh, right? Because where the heck, my family hasn't had a flyable airplane in for longer than 2 weeks in more than 6 years, right? And so we got Oshkosh. Our son wants to go to Oshkosh. We want to go to Oshkosh. We load up, throw everything in there. We could have enough fuel to go there and back and still load, the barbecue and everything else with us. So we're cruising along, and we're almost there, and the field goes IFR. And so I'm thinking, man, I'm 40 minutes from there. I just passed my first planned diversion airport. I'm going to go up and see, because in 40 minutes, the airport may reopen. Let's go take a look at it. So we're coming down, there's clouds, we're VFR. My wife and I are both professional pilots, and we spend our time in the professional sphere of aviation. And I had decided, you know what, I'm gonna go back to grassroots. I'm gonna fly at 10.5 with no radio communications whatsoever. I'm not gonna do ATC. I'm just gonna sit back and cruise and watch the clouds go by, because this is my vacation and I don't wanna deal with it. So you don't have to operate in the system. Private pilots, there's a million people at Oshkosh who got there without speaking on the radio once, and that's great, I think. This is one of the beauties of our country and the ability for us to be able to do this. Professionally, yeah, we have to operate in the IFR world, and we have to talk to everybody, and we have to dot the I's and cross the T's, but vacation is vacation. So here we are cruising along, and in the descent, I'm ducking and weaving around some towering cumulus, and all of a sudden, my left engine starts revving, and I'm thinking, oh, well, boy, that prop governor sure is acting up right now, right? So I'm looking at my power settings, and I'm adjusting, and we're weaving around the clouds, and my sun's turning a little bit the wrong shade of color, and so I'm trying to be mindful of my passengers and where I'm going, and I know there's a million airplanes in the sky, so I got some real traffic to concern myself with. In other words, the workload all of a sudden has gone from, hey, I'm cruising, I'm listening to the ATIS, to, wow, this is really complicated. And then the engine starts giving me fits. Well, I'm sitting there thinking, man, the tachometer is revving back and forth, and what am I going to do with this? So I pull the power off on that engine, and I'm like, it behaves itself. I said, okay. So I continue my descent, still shooting the clouds, trying to find the bases, and I come out the bottom, and the engine just quits. And I'm like, what the heck is going on with this engine? And I said, you know what? I don't have time to deal with it. I got to load shed something here. I've got too many things going on. So I feathered the engine, and then I thought, should I call somebody? And then I thought, well, I have guard dialed in, but who's going to help me, right? And that's when I threw the idea out the window. No reason to declare it, because nobody knows who I am, where I am, or what I'm doing, right? So then the next thing I'm doing, I've secured the engine, I'm looking at my cabin, everything's okay, seatbelts are on, we're going to find an airport. And so then the nearest button comes out on the GPS. I've got 2 feet on the right rudder pedal, and I've trimmed everything to the stop. The trim tab's on the left rudder, which isn't helping when the left engine shut down. So now I'm fighting the good fight. And I can't find an airport that has more than 2,800 feet of runway in front of me. And it's just one of those days where I'm like, man, can a guy catch a break? I just wanted to be on vacation. My margarita machine's waiting at Oshkosh, and now I'm here. So anyway, we ended up diverting and having an uneventful landing at an airport that had just opened that very day. So we touched down on a runway with no paint marks or anything else, and it was completely uneventful. And what I want to attest to it is that the first thing in my mind was just fly the plane, work the problem and fly the plane. And everything that I hear about successful outcomes typically is people not getting distracted by the million things that are going on there. Qantas had a flight in the Asian realm a while back in a 380, and they blew their number 2 engine. And it basically crippled the airplane. And they got so involved working the problem that they kind of forgot to fly the plane. And finally, an observer, my understanding was 5 people in the cockpit. One of them in the very back, the lowest guy on the totem pole, rank-wise, said, we're going to run out of gas in CG because we can't transfer our fuel forward out of the tail. And all of a sudden, everybody stopped and said, holy smokes, he's right. We have to land now. Somebody needs to be flying the airplane. We can't just focus on only the problem at hand. Is that engine behaving itself? No, it's not. But what am I going to do after I cage it? I need to do something else, right? Need to get the airplane on the ground. Do I need to worry about communicating with some tower somewhere who's going to answer my guard call? Well, maybe, but I'd rather find a place to land than worry about getting on the telephone with somebody, right? That guy can't help me in my situation, so I need to help me. I have to fly the plane to the ground and find a safe conclusion for my event, whatever it happens to be.
So did you, in the Osh trip, did you declare an emergency?
I did not.
But you also had a seasoned professional pilot sitting right seat with you, right?
No, she was in the back.
Oh, she was in the back.
Yeah. she took great pictures of it while it happened. So
we'll have to have those and show
posterity.
them. Interesting.
I'd like to say one other thing about emergencies, and I talk about this ad nauseum with clients who pay a lot of money to come see us at our training center, but one of my big issues is you get one decision and then you have to live with whatever you decided to do. And whether it's good or bad, now all of a sudden you have this happening. You can't go back. We go to Sully Sullenberger, which is not my favorite example of things, but I will credit him with one of the things that I think that he did very well. Once he decided a course of action, he didn't waver from it, right? We're going to land this plane in the Hudson, the end, right? I'm in an air coupe. Oh, look, there's a runway over there. Can I make it? And that thought of can I make it, that's the one that puts everybody in the dirt. We say, oh, there's a perfectly good field there. The airplane's going to maybe survive, but I'm going to walk away from this. That's where we're going to go. We're not going to stop and change things once we've decided our course of action. And then we live with the results. ATR 72 crashed out of Taipei, I think it was, not that long ago. It was spectacular dash cam footage of the thing clipping a bridge and traffic lanes. And one of the big problems in that accident was that they changed their course of action several times. And then nobody flew the plane, and no one accepted the fact that they were going to have to land the airplane. Tamara said, I can't hold altitude. We're landing. It doesn't matter what's in front of us. We're going to aim for the runway, follow this until we stop moving, right? Those guys, they refused to accept the reality of the situation, which was we screwed up the good engine and the bad engine isn't going to get us to where we need to go. And instead of finding a place where the airplane could survive, they tried to hold altitude until they ran out of flying speed, right? So sticking with it and accepting the decision that you made and then working through the decision is one of the best pieces of advice I could give anybody.
Let me follow on one thing that Travis just said. I think it's important in an emergency to understand that saving the airplane is the last priority. The only priority is walking away from it as best you can. So somebody has insurance on the airplane, and if they don't, it doesn't really matter. All that matters is that you come up with a plan and you do follow through with that. If it means putting it between trees because that's the only thing that's out there, then do that. But make sure that you fly an airplane into the trees if that's what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Well, good. I really appreciate you guys coming today and sharing your wisdom on emergencies. I know I learned a lot.
Oh, I'm walking away a better pilot because of this discussion.
So thanks for watching, and as always, please share, subscribe, and leave comments, and we'll talk to you next time.